All right, shall we resume?
Yes, let's do it. Should we maybe start from the beginning, or would you just like to continue?
I think we can go ahead.
Great. Sorry for the interruption, everybody, but I hope that today's show of the dashboard is worth it. So again, this is the overall activity of the Flashbots network. I'm going to try and go a little bit quicker to save time, but we have a little bit over 2,000 unique searchers that have used Flashbots. These are the folks that are sending transactions through the Flashbots network. We quantify someone as a unique searcher if they've sent over 20 unique bundles to the network. And this is measuring signing keys in the relay. Around $45 million in miner profit has been made by miners that are receiving Flashbots bundles and running MEV Geth. And that is profit after opportunity cost is taken away, which amounts to about a 5.2% increase in miner revenue per Flashbots block that a miner is running. And we've had just over 90,000, about 91,000 different Flash blocks, which we call blocks included with Flashbots bundles included in them. We have around 84% of hash rate that accounts for the miners, which are running MEV Geth and receiving Flashbots bundles. We can see here a couple of statistics on bundles submitted versus forwarded. The interesting thing about this is over time, at the very beginning, it seemed like the rate at which bundles are forwarded to miners was fairly high. The reason why we wouldn't forward a bundle in Flashbots Relay is if it failed a simulation, if it had reverts, or if it was not profitable for a miner to include it in a block. And so over time, this started out pretty high, and then since then has oscillated between 20 and 40% and is on the uptrend over time. And on a week-to-week basis, we're getting a little bit over 3 million different bundles from Flashbots searchers. It's pretty cool. Of that 3 million a week, something around 14 to 15,000 end up landing on chain. And in the last 10,000 Ethereum blocks, we can observe roughly 35% or so of those last 10,000 blocks have Flashbots bundles included in them. And we're using up just over 2% of the total Ethereum block space in the blocks where Flashbots bundles are included. So if you take the gas limit of a block and you look at just particularly what part a bundle is capturing, that's about 2%. Trending down over time, but a little bit of an increase recently. If we look at searchers, you can see that the number of unique searchers that have landed on chain has been increasing month to month pretty drastically. Last month, we had a rapid adoption from searchers. So we've gone up from 44 different unique searchers in the relay to a little bit over 600. That's about a 14 or 15x increase. Slightly less from contracts and EOAs that have landed on chain, but still a pretty drastic multiplier here. And these are specifically looking at searchers that have landed bundles on chain. The numbers are even higher if they haven't had bundles included on chain. And you can see that split over time on a week-to-week basis here on the right. And it's interesting is it sort of looks like the searchers who are not having bundles included on chain are getting weeded out because the percentage of searchers that are getting bundles included on chain is increasing over time. So searchers seem to be getting better. This also does correlate in some way with our hash rate too. You can see the distribution of bundle gas prices here. So this is looking at the gray line is the tail gas price of a block. So the least profitable transactions within a block. And then the other colored lines are green, yellow, blue, and red are different parts of the distribution of gas prices within Flashbots bundles. So the very top of Flashbots bundles distribution, the 75th percentile or higher is this blue line. The median is the yellow line, and the lower end is the red line here. And the very minimum is green. And you can see pretty consistently that bundles are priced way higher than the tail gas price here, which ends up in profit for the miner. And this is another way of looking at the distribution of gas prices instead of looking at like the variance where the 75th percentile and 25th percentile is. This looks at the particular numbers and the frequency within particular days. So the big red chunk here you see is the percentage of bundles that are over 300 GWh gas price, which is about 46%, and then a couple of other. I encourage you to go to this chart and like hover over the colors and look at it for yourself. It's pretty cool. And over time, our average gas price of mined bundles is 671 with a median of 316. This is pretty cool. I'm gonna change the date really quick. We have leaderboards that look at the total amount that different searchers have paid over time to miners. It's very difficult to quantify the profit that a searcher has made because that implies that you can look at many transactions in a scalable way and figure out how much they're making and then how much they're paying to a miner. And this is especially difficult if there are multiple different transactions in a bundle where a searcher makes profit. So we think that we have a scalable way to do this, but it's not quite done yet. And in the meantime, since we don't have the searcher profit, we are using the amount that a searcher has paid to miners as a proxy for that. You can see here on the left, the top searcher EOAs measured by the USD that they paid to miners. A couple EOAs are getting up into the millions of dollars paid to miners. And the average miner payment is on the left. So some of these EOAs are paying over $70,000 on average to miners to have a single bundle included, which is pretty wild. Contracts, the numbers are even higher, which makes sense. Searchers will use multiple EOAs for one contract. And our top searcher here, measured by the amount of USD they've paid to miners, has paid over $7 million to have their bundles included over time to miners. And there are, I think, 11 different contracts that have paid over $1 million. So pretty interesting numbers. These are different graphs that show sort of the distribution. You can look just kind of eyeball and see out of the top 25 EOAs, what percentage of this pie are they capturing versus everybody else? It's pretty top heavy. So the best searchers are really good, disproportionately so compared to others. And you can see that compared to the miner rewards that they capture, EOAs consume relatively less gas than everybody else does. So this 41% here is only 34%, which implies that the top EOAs are much more gas efficient. And I won't go through each of these, but I do encourage you to take these transaction hashes and plug them into Etherscan because they're super interesting. These are the top bundles of all time, measured by the payment to miners. So we have a bunch of different bundles that have paid around $200,000 and a bunch over 100,000 as well. I'm getting a red screen. I don't know what that is. Can you all see my screen still?
It's red for me too. Oh.
I'm gonna re-share. Sorry about that, everybody.
Yeah, it's working now.
Thanks, Alex. And then you can also see bundles with the largest number of transactions in them, which is pretty interesting too. A couple searchers have gotten over 20 transactions included in their bundles. So lastly, we have some really interesting metrics on miners as well. First, looking at the total profit that miners have made from Flashbots, again, around 45 million, which you saw on the network page, of which 35 million has taken place in the last 30 days. And it was the most profitable day for miners on Flashbots yesterday. And miners profited $3.3 million from Flashbots bundles in the last 24 hours, which is pretty insane. This works out over time to about a 5.5% increase in miner revenue. You can see here we were a little bit under 0.5% for a while until March, with an uptick in searcher activity, which has been steadily increasing over time. And we're oscillating between 6% and 5.5% or so now. It's another way to look at the profit over time, but a cumulative graph, the total amount that we've paid. It's pretty cool seeing this slope change and go up over time. And also the average miner profit in USD per Flashbots block, looked at the daily average here. Last month, we paid out $22 million in profits to miners, and already in 13 days in May, there's been $20 million worth of profit from Flashbots to miners. So obviously you're going to crush this number. And here is the daily miner profit that miners are making from Flashbots bundles. You can even go so far as to dig into the individual miners. So if we look at yesterday, Sparkpool profited about $1 million from Flashbots yesterday alone. And you can look at individual pools beyond that too. Yesterday, this is, again, a little bit over $3.3 million. And digging into the distribution of USD profit of Flashbots blocks. So about the way that you would interpret this chart is 57% of blocks pay out a miner profit of between $250 and $2.5 thousand to the miner. And if I didn't mention it already, you can click this button at the top and get all of these graphs in either ETH or USD, depending on your preference. So we have gas prices here. This looks at the gas price with the red line of Flashbots bundles, and then the gas price of the transactions that are displaced by Flashbots bundles. So the tail gas prices. And this is a logarithmic chart. And it's very clear here that the red line is much higher than the yellow line. So miners are making more profit by including these red line Flashbots bundles than they would be by including the least profitable transactions in their block, which are being displaced to include Flashbots bundles in transactions. If you smooth that out and look at the medians over time, this is how that graph looks. So again, the purple line is clearly dominating over the blue line. Blue line is the transactions that are displaced, the tail gas price, and then the purple is Flashbots bundles. These were pretty tightly coupled until March with an uptick in searcher activity, and then they diverged, and over time have been diverging even more. It is very interesting because we see that this purple line it reacts much more than the blue does to increases in gas price. So gas prices increased yesterday, and you can see that the purple line just shot up far more than the blue line did. And the difference between these two is one of the inputs into the function of miner profits. You look at the different miners that are mining Flashbots bundles today, and the percentage of hash rate that they account for. I won't dwell on that. And then the number of blocks that individual miners have mined, which is pretty cool. This is per 10,000 blocks. You saw this on the network page v0.2, but this is the percentage of 10,000 blocks that have Flashbots bundles included in them. So in the last 10,000 blocks, there have been 33% of those had Flashbots bundles included. So about 3,300 of those last 10,000 blocks. And again, like many of our other charts, starts pretty flat and an exponential increase around the time of March. Now we're sitting around 30 to 35%. Lastly, you can look at the top Flashbots miners measured by the total ETH that they've earned. So Sparkpool, who has a lot of hash rate, has been paid around $20.4 million, and many miners have made over $1 million over time. And the average miner profit per block as well. The last thing that I'll mention is if you're interested in the definitions and like some of the caveats in this data, the data coverage or data sources, that is cataloged within the data and metrics page. So now I will take a second to check out the chat. I don't know if we have time to take questions right now or what your schedule was, Tina.
Feel free to take the question in the chat, and then we'll move on to v0.2.
Okay. So Nas writes, is it possible to see what languages searchers use, whether it is in Go, JS, or Python, or maybe something else? And no, Nas, it's not possible to see this from on-chain data, but I will say that the searchers channel in our Discord is very leaky. People love to talk about the work that they're doing. And if you just ask, people will probably tell you what languages they're using. So join our Discord. And Yaz, I think that's how you pronounce your name. You say, why do we consider a searcher account unique if it includes 20 bundles minimum? The reason for that is we identify searchers using a private key that they sign their bundles with before they send them to the relay. And it's very easy to generate a new private key. It's trivial. You could do it in moments if you wanted to. So a searcher could be generating a new private key for every single bundle and signing those bundles if they wanted to. But if the searcher is consistently sending bundles with the same unique key over time, it's probably the same person, or at least there's a higher likelihood that it is the same searcher. So this 20 bundle minimum is a threshold that we set to try to get at unique searchers instead of just searchers using random signing keys for all of their bundles. Any other questions?
Well, maybe answer the question from Nas, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so Nas says, wouldn't searchers want to use the same key? That way they are more likely to get included. You are right in spirit. We want to introduce some form of reputation to the system to encourage that kind of behavior of people using the same key over time. In practice today, we don't have that implemented. So we're still working on what the right mechanisms are for reputation. And right now, that's not in our system. Yep. Thank you for your questions. Tina, I will hand it back to you.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone's question. This is V0 of the Flashbots Transparency Dashboard. We hope that this will eventually phase out our transparency report, which was also just released. I shared a Twitter thread, and the last tweet is the transparency report. So feel free to ask us any questions. And as you can see, there are certain things such as identity or such as reputation are the things that we would love to get community suggestion on what is the best approach in digesting in defining these metrics that can make it useful for all of us. However, let's move on from this exciting new dashboard release to our upcoming Flashbots Core v0.2 release. And I would like to invite Stefan to share a bit about the changes that has gone into this version. Sorry that I just clicked. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, happy to go over it. So v0.2 is our latest release of the Flashbots core infrastructure that we've been working on. It aims to provide mainly bundle merging and introduce that to the system such that it increases miner profitability, but also provides searchers with a higher hit rate, which allows for multiple searchers to compete for different opportunities within the same block. We've been working on this for a little while now, and we are nearing the completion date. We decided to remove a couple features from the release, which we received feedback from the community on. So the proxy payment contract, which aimed to provide a more reliable accounting for payments, as well as introduce a method for future additions to the feature set. So basically allow us to modify the smart contract and introduce a way to smooth payments over time. But the community felt there was still some designing and exploration that should be done. So we decided to remove that from this release. The other thing we removed was the ability to submit full blocks from a relay to the miner. The reason why we wanted to release this one is because of the complexity of the changes on the miners node, which could cause some consensus errors. And so it was sort of a high risk feature, which we felt we needed more time to test before releasing. So remove that too. But we're keeping bundle merging. We're keeping better connections over WebSockets, and some of the other goodies in here. So strict profit switching, which is optional, and testnet infrastructure, as well as sharing and getting feedback on the fair market principles. Okay, so if we have searchers in the chat here, you'll be aware that we've started the searcher upgrade phase, which is going to go on until May 24th. And then on May 17th is when the miners will start their upgrade. So on May 17th, we'll code freeze the MEV, Geth, and relay code base, publish a formal specification for all the miners to start to implement. And then over a period of 2 weeks, they'll sort of do a rolling upgrade. The goal is to get to May 31st, having upgraded all the switchers and all the miners to the v0.2 architecture. So this sort of covers a bit more about the step-by-step. So for the searchers, what you need to do to upgrade is pretty simple. All you need to do is change the interface through which you're communicating with the relay, and that can be done by upgrading your the libraries that you're using. If you're using the Ethers library or the Web3 library, if you're just sending raw RPC calls, then you'll want to look at the new RPC parameters format on our documentation to make sure that your submission is up to date. Deadline for searchers to upgrade is May 24th, but we encourage you to upgrade as soon as possible, since there's no downside to upgrading early. So yeah. And then on the miner side, we have a bit more of a staged release. So on May 17th, when we do the code freeze, this is when miners receive the code and they can start implementing it, reviewing it. We ask the miners to set up a parallel deployment so that they have both v0.1 and v0.2 deployed at different on different machines with different IPs. and to provide us with the IPs of the v0.2 nodes. The reason we want to do that is have a clean way to fall back if the miner experiences any issues without causing downtime for the miner. So these parallel deployments will start coming online from May 17th all the way to May 31st. But we won't we won't send v0.2 bundle flow to miners until May 24th. So as a searcher, if you are sort of expecting to see your bundles start to be included with other bundles in the block, or you have some conditional logic based on the pricing functions change, you'll see that those will change on May 24th is when we do the cutover. And then between May 24th and May 31st, it'll just be about making sure the system is running smoothly while still having the v0.1 backup. And then on May 31st, we'll tell the miners, hey, everything's great. You can now shut down your v0.1 node and just move forward with v0.2. So one of the things we've been working on is the fair market principles, which are a set of guidelines and best practices for both Flashbots as well as anyone participating in the Flashbots infrastructure, including the miners and mining pools, on how to maintain a healthy ecosystem for MEV extraction. And so the principles cover correctness of how the system is implemented, fairness of treating all sort of participants equally, finality, so not doing some kind of funny stuff with uncles and reorgs to try to maximize profit, but instead to maximize chain stability, and privacy around making sure that the bundle content remains private. And then some of the best practices are more around how do we make sure that we have high system reliability, and in the case of bugs or critical failures, what is the response path? And then penalty and remediation is basically if some of these are not being followed by the miners, we may disable temporarily their bundle flow just to make sure that the system isn't compromised until we are reasonably certain that they are back online and implemented correctly. So this is sort of our approach to maintaining a healthy ecosystem within the early stages of our releases. So as many of you are aware, I'm sure, v0.2 is still part of our alpha. So the alpha is all the v0 point series, and these include incomplete trust guarantees. So slowly over time, we want to replace all of these guidelines with hard crypto economic or cryptographic guarantees. And so we are on the second step of our roadmap towards achieving the full set of guarantees that we've set out to achieve. So there's definitely some more upgrades to be seen in the future that will iteratively improve these guarantees.
Great, thank you, Stefan. Any questions here for what we're about to release in full force? And feel free to continue to drop your questions if they come up in the side chat. And we should move on to the research update. Alejo, would you mind give us a TLDR on the priorities and what we've been working on?
Sure. So we've done a lot of work, especially on ETH2 and the changes that are coming in Ethereum. This was work by Alex and Thomas and collaborators. So the first item there was a presentation Thomas and Alex gave in the ETH Global event So what MEV looks like or will look like after the merge, and how validator rewards will be impacted by MEV extraction. I encourage you to check that out. Then there's a coming extended post by Alex that he has been working on for some time now on MEV and ETH2. This is upcoming, soon to be released, where all the content on that presentation is expanded upon. It's a super interesting topic. TLDR of that is that actually validators can expect to get much more rewards if they extract MEV. The second item there is a hackathon in which we participated as a team, and Tomas and Edgar from Flashbots, people from Nethermind, and people from Lido working together on liquid staking. They actually won the hackathon, or were among the finalists, but there was some condition that meant that they won. So we're super happy about that. And yeah, I encourage you to check the prototype demo. There's a video online where they explain their work. Essentially, it's the very early proof of concept of how the MEV landscape will look like and will be extracted by connecting the Nethermind node with the Flashbot system and using Lido staking for ETH2. So super interesting work, and very impressive. They put it up in no time. So finally, we had an MEV roast also, and as you see, like as I said, most of the topics were around ETH2. So this past roast we had was around scaling Ethereum. So not only ETH2 but also L2s, and how what the MEV landscape looks like there. Super interesting. There were several talks there, 2 panels. If you haven't participated in that roast, do check the video. And if you're only coming to the community events, I encourage you to also check our roast. They're super interesting events. They're more technical. They go into the weeds of all these problems or future challenges we'll face as an organization and with our auction system. So I now will talk a little bit about the Flashbot research priorities. So we're undergoing a little bit of a revamp of our GitHub research repository, where we keep this the list of topics we work on, and we have the process for grant issuing that we do. We issue grants for external collaborators to work on some of the topics. So some of I won't go through the entire list here, but some of the highlights there is first the auction design. Surya, an external collaborator, has been working on surveying the work for around auction, all the auction literature, and how that would apply or not to our problem. So we essentially, the core of Flashbots is an auction system to match the searchers with the miners. So there's lots of super interesting design questions there, in particular, what guarantees we can give to the miners, what guarantees we can give to the searchers. So there's really interesting problems there. There's even problems to be defined. So I encourage you to check the research repo for more details on what the questions around auction design are. Second topic is cryptographic privacy. As it was mentioned before, one of the approaches to try to deal with privacy. So right now, we're running a Flashbots relay, and so that's necessary because the bundles searchers send are not private. So we ultimately want to remove that and ensure a privacy property. So we have issued a grant to Hashcloak, the Hashcloak team, who is working already on trying to tackle this problem, right? How can we provide some cryptographic guarantees? Can you go back? Yeah. Some cryptographic guarantees to provide, ensure privacy of searchers. Cryptographic privacy, I don't know why the MEV SGX is under this item. So currently the way we're working towards doing the guaranteeing privacy is using secure hardware. So that's through an implementation of the auction system that's MEV SGX. We have an F research post coming up on describing the prototype system we want to build. Next steps will be to start the implementation of that and check for feasibility in terms of lag and the delays the SGX module inserts in the system. So I want to make sure that that's not an issue, and if that's not an issue, we'll go ahead and start building an auction system depending on secure hardware. And so that's upcoming for people to provide more concrete feedback, but we will soon also begin with implementing that. As I said before, there's other ways around the problem of privacy. So MEV SGX is one, but we don't want to be fully reliant on secure hardware. So we're also exploring crypto economic alternatives to it, and that's a much earlier question in the research process. So again, I encourage you to check the research repo for that if you're interested in this problem. In particular, this interacts a lot with the if2 scenario. Some ideas around whether we can use validator keys to ensure privacy, so that bundles are signed with the validator key, so only the validators that will propose the target blocks for the opportunities can decrypt these bundles. So yeah, that's one alternative, and validators also already have bonds, so they will be slashed if they fail to behave as expected. So there's many questions on how this can be done, and whether like the if2 setting where we already have like bonds can be leveraged to actually do MEV extraction and ensure privacy without the secure hardware. So as I said before, lots of work on L2 and if2. There's a research post coming up by Alex on if2. More work needed on L2. And finally, first sequencing. Will be the topic of our next workshop or roast. As you know, some people have been saying that Flashbot were like enabling thieves by making the auction more efficient. So we've responded to those critiques, but we do think that first sequence is a valid alternative for exploration. So we want to try to pursue what the limits are of first sequencing. I encourage you to read Phil's post on MEV what do. It's a recent post that tackles this question. TLDR, it's very hard to say what's fair. So whenever you say fair, there's a person saying defining fair. So it's hard to try to build a fair system if you don't have like an unbiased definition of fair. So yeah, that's the well, I don't know, that didn't work. That's the research update in a nutshell. Again, more if you find more, there's other topics I haven't covered here, but feel free to go to our research repo and check out and ask questions in our Discord research channel as well. I don't know if there's questions in the chat. If you have any questions, otherwise I'll give it back to you, Tina.
Thank you, Alejo. I think a lot of I definitely see quite a few researchers here. So I would love to hear some of your questions on research and on a lot of the things that we just presented. For every single community call, it's always been such an exciting, but almost felt like information dump because so much has transpired and we just don't have enough time. So yeah, any questions that particularly around our learnings, a lot of learnings around ETH2, or on essentially the upcoming engineering updates, as well as engineering roadmap, or the questions around dashboard. Wow, quiet day. Maybe I think let me ask a couple questions before we yes, it's all about the dogs. So like I think a couple of things that are very interesting we could share a bit is one is insights on prototyping the MEV on ETH2 with staking essentially with staking contracts. And second is to share kind of, Alex, would you be able to share a bit of insights on our discussion on ETH2? And the second question will be for actually Robert to share more insights on recent bot activities that you've witnessed. Could be fun to kind of share with some of the searchers and researchers.
Sure. On ETH2, so we've given two presentations, one with Thomas, who is representing Nethermind, but is also working closely with us. And once the week later at the MEV roast that we ran at ETH Global. And so we've shared some of our initial findings there, which are quite interesting. Especially it seems that running a system like Flashbots in ETH2 is very doable, and it would rely on the same software. And by this, I mean the ETH1 client would still be used. And so something like MEV Geth could still be used in the ETH2 context. So that's been quite interesting. And then further to this kind of exploratory research, Tomas, Edgar from our team, and individuals from the Nethermind and Lido team have kind of prototyped at the ETH Global Hackathon or the Rayonism Hackathon on the ETH1, ETH2 testnet that was set up, what that would look like. And so we got some insights there that were interesting as well.
Would you mind sharing a bit of the specific insights, Alex?
Right. So I mean, while theoretically, you know, it's relatively simple, there are more players to think about when you think about how the MEV rewards are split, as well as ultimately the block proposer is changed from the miner to the validator. And so the block is, while it's still an ETH1 block, it's still proposed on ETH2 and included as part of an ETH2 block or beacon chain block. And so there are complexities there in how the mechanism interacts. The kind of MEV flow and the tip flow mechanism works. Further to that, I think there's a lot more interesting questions to ask around how resilient the system is and how resistant could it be to potential collusion or like malicious behavior. And so I believe the hackathon team is presenting now at the final, and their work is shared publicly. And then in addition, Alejo mentioned there will be a post soon outlining a lot of that research in more details, as well as expanding on some of the interesting topics that have come up from that research, not only from the implementation side, but also from other aspects of what MEV and ETH2 might look like and how the landscape might change.
Cool. Well, thanks, Alex. I think there's so much happened in that. It's very hard to kind of digest all of it in 5 minutes. So I think check out our post when they come out, and continue to follow us on Discord. And if you're a searcher or a miner, please pay close attention to our release channel. I think that's a great way to end today's call. And thanks everyone for staying with us despite the Zoom bombing event happened.
Thanks everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.